Good morning and welcome to the webinar Accelerating Blue Bond Issuances in Latin America and the Caribbean. I am Carole Sans-Paris, the Head of Debt Capital Markets and Structured Finance at IDB Invest. Yesterday, we celebrated the UN World Ocean Day, reminding every one of us of the importance of the ocean for our livelihoods and our dependence on its health. That day was a day to mobilize and unite towards a connection to the ocean, a connection that is inclusive and innovative. Today's conversation is about expanding the blue economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, and more specifically about financing the transformation towards sustainable ocean economy. Our region is shaped by its oceans. 23 countries out of 33 have more marine than terrestrial territory. The blue economy presents itself as a multi-beneficial solution to generate new jobs, to integrate small-scale economies into global economies, and of course, for environmental protection. Sustainable ocean investment are on the rise. And today we will speak about the blue bonds, a subcategory of the green bonds. Blue bonds are innovative financing solutions that can mobilize capital to advance sustainable ocean opportunities. But first, some announcement. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We have simultaneous translation into Spanish available at the top of your screen. And if you are seeing us on our LinkedIn or Twitter account, si nos estás viendo y quieres traducción al español, entra en la web bluebondswebinar.com para encontrar opción de traducción. And our last announcement is that this session is being recorded. Our guest today present the financial sector, multinational corporation, and policymakers. They are with us today to tell us about the importance of the blue economy for our region and how Blue Bond can raise capital for land and ocean-based projects and for companies seeking to have a direct impact on the ocean and water-related issues. The webinar will be in 3 parts. The first part will be a conversation around the blue economy and what it is and what it means for Barbados. It will be followed by a panel discussion on Blue Bond, and we will end with some closing remarks. Welcome, everybody, and let's begin. It is a great pleasure to welcome the Honorable Marsha Cadell with us today. Minister Cadell is an economist, a member of Parliament, and Minister for Economics and Investment, Economic Affairs and Investment in Barbados. Minister Cadell's specialties in economics are financing for development, economic governance, competitiveness and investment, inequality, social protection, and human development. Minister Cadell leads the government's climate action and climate finance agenda, spearheading the Roofs to Reefs project program, which is a multi-year roadmap or multi-year investment roadmap for climate resilience development. Thank you very much, Minister Cadell, for being with us today. I would also like to welcome James Craven. James Craven is a CEO of IDB Invest, the private sector institution of the Inter-American Development Group. IDB Invest is a multilateral development bank focused on providing innovative solutions and advisory services for its clients, while achieving the sustainable development goals in Latin America and the Caribbean. James Craven was previously Vice President of Corporate Risk and Sustainability at the IFC and has concentrated his efforts over the last 2 decades promoting the role of the private sector in development. The floor is yours, James.
Thank you very much, Carole. Let me start by thanking you and everybody for your participation, and thank you to the UN Global Compact for your partnership and commitment with us. I want to start by welcoming my dear friend, Minister Cadell. It is a pleasure to have you here talking with us about your experience in blue economy and representing Barbados. As many of my IDB Invest colleagues know, I'm an ocean lover. As a dual citizen from Argentina, but also from the British Islands, my father was born in Jersey, I grew up developing a strong connection with oceans. Seeing how IDB Invest is being on the topic makes me feel very proud of our work. We are living complex times while Latin America and the Caribbean are still dealing with the devastating pandemic consequences. Governments and societies face two paths, one of continuous economic deterioration and on the other one of recovery, reinvestment, and renewed opportunities. The second one is the one that we at IDB Invest want to contribute to activate. As a multilateral development bank, we are committed to the sustainable development of our member countries in Latin America and the Caribbean through the private sector. The region has the opportunity to build back better, and that means to work with a sustainable lens in the greens and inclusive recovery of our countries. There will be no long-term recovery to the crisis unless these dual challenges are addressed, and it is imperative that the private sector has a main role to achieve this. With nearly 25% of Latin America population, 100% of the Caribbean living on the coast, and the blue economy is essential for the sustainability of our business. Moreover, maintaining a healthy and productive ocean is a critical precondition for achieving all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Covering 70% of the planet, the ocean helps mitigate climate change by storing large amounts of carbon dioxide. Only in Latin America, 28 million tons of plastic waste are generated annually, and 4 million of those enter the ocean. We all have an urgent responsibility to reduce and reverse this problem. Regarding the private sector, IDB Invest has clients in the agriculture, port, sustainable infrastructure, tourism, and financial sector segments. All these sectors provide clear opportunity to engage with the blue economy. To do that, we hold financing and knowledge experience to introduce a transition to blue business practices and financing. In fact, we are already working with SMEs and corporates around the region in supporting its transition to phase out of plastic in their business operations, such as adopting of circular solutions in plastic and packaging. Furthermore, IDB Invest is promoting climate-smart agriculture, which includes advising clients to reduce agrochemical runoffs and to preserve ocean health and coastal ecosystems. More relevant to the topic of this webinar, we're also committed to developing strong capital markets in the region through the thematic bonds, and analysis presented today is an example of that. IDB Invest can help elevate the quality and market standards for blue bonds in the region and globally, because we monitor and evaluate social indicators as part of our standard business practice. We know that it is only the beginning, but we are already doing more than with our clients. It is a time to go forward, and I'm a strong believer that taking care of the oceans while finding a way to take advantage of its potential in a sustainable way is fundamental to the future growth of our economies. Now let me start my conversation with Marcia by welcoming her again. Marcia, you live in the Caribbean island that it is, for sure, very interested in the development of these opportunities related to the ocean. Let me start with one question. Can you tell us from your perspective what means the blue economy?
Thanks, James. It's wonderful to be having this conversation. I had a talk with someone this morning, and they said to me, I'm here to enjoy a discussion with you. And I thought that was such a wonderful way to put it. So I want to start by saying I'm here to enjoy a discussion with you and everyone who is connected with us today. As your work shows, the work that you've just been doing with the UN Global Compact, I very much like the way it's framed in the document, because it says 100% of Caribbean people live in coastal areas. And that's something that we've been trying to get everyone to understand, that no matter the size of the island, because of the connectivity between the land in our small islands, and the ocean. We are all living in coastal areas, and I think that's one very important thing to understand. In Barbados, our marine space is 424 times our land space, and so we are a blue and coastal economy. It means that from our legacy of fishing, to boat building, to everything surrounding that industry, that we really need to be able to build out and build on the platform that has been created in the marine economy for over 50 years. We started by making sure that we could introduce technology many decades ago, so that fisher folk would have easier access. But obviously now we have to look not just at how we are able to take advantage of the resources in the ocean economy, but to make sure that they're developed in a sustainable way along with people. And so that's very important to us. We established 3 years ago a Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the blue economy. And that for us, you always say, if you want an idea of where a government's priorities are, look at its budget, but also look at how it arranges its governance to be able to be effective. And by establishing that ministry, we were very clear that we intend for the marine economy to be very much at the heart of what we do in Barbados, to be able to provide for our people and improve their well-being. So that ministry has set some very clear 2030 targets to be able to build out the sector. One of those is to create the most blue skilled human resource in the world by 2030. Carol mentioned earlier how important it is to be able to take advantage of the marine economy and the blue economy to be able to create opportunities for people. And for us, that's really the point. So for everything from tourism to energy, to marine technology, health and nutrition, bioeconomy and biotechnology, and marine industrial services, including transport and logistics. These are all of the areas in which we see the blue economy being important. But I have to say something very important, and that is that there can be no separation of the development of this space and its use to expand GDP, increase its contribution to GDP, and its sustainable development. I think that later in our conversation, we'll have an opportunity to talk about how we see that, how we see the very important regeneration of the reefs, what it means to make sure that the blue economy and the marine environment remains healthy, that we are able to continue to have a relationship between people and the ocean. If we don't protect the environment while we're able to benefit from it, all that will be in vain. And so we have some very clear areas of investment that we see developing. Everything from sea moss farming, which is a growing industry worldwide, to electrical boat design to make sure that we also align our blue economy targets with our mitigation targets to be fossil fuel free also by 2030. And so electrical boat design and building is something that we're very much interested in. To offshore wind and solar, to hydrogen energy generation and storage. So, James, I'd say that the blue economy is at the center of everything that we do, is at the center of the way that we live. We see it as a way to greatly expand opportunities for people, but we also see it as a way to generate investment opportunities and to make sure that we are able to achieve all of the sustainable development goals in the time that we've set.
Love it. You probably answered part of the question, but I loved the name Roofs to Reefs program. I know that in response to climate change challenges, the government of Barbados has launched what is called the Roof to Reef program. The government, it's a sustainable development model for the next decade. Please, if you could tell us a bit more about this program.
Thanks. Well, Roofs to Reefs is something that we're very proud of developing, and we call it Roofs to Reefs. I know many who are listening and who are watching would be familiar with the ridge to reef concept of sustainable development. But the reason we call it Roofs to Reefs is that we understand and we wanted to make quite visible that it starts with people and people's relationship with the environment. Now, traditionally, I'm a development economist, and so one of the things I always have to emphasize is that people are not just consumers of goods and services. Households are not just consumers of goods and services. Households very much produce and interact with markets every day, with formal markets every day. And one of those markets is the blue market or the green market. One of those markets is the environment. And so Roofs to Reefs make sure that we start at the level of the household and the individual. And one of those ways, we call it roofs because the idea first started in our policy discussions, because one of the things we have to make sure that we build in every day that we show up to work is resilience in people's lives at the national level. Now, people who know Barbados may recall that we had a Hurricane Jeanette several decades ago. It's perhaps still our worst event to date. And following that event, we had to very quickly get roofs back on homes. And the roofs were at that time, and the name storm carpenters came up because the roofs at that time were just built back in a way to be able to cover people and to make sure they were safe temporarily. But what started to happen then is that the roofs started to be built in a way that weren't very resilient. And so the Roofs to Reefs concept started because we wanted to make sure that we built resilience in first at the level of the households, then at the level of communities and what people are doing and how they live. And also to make sure that things like some things that were mentioned earlier, like that you mentioned, James, agricultural runoff, nitrates, and so on, the way that people live and farm and industry practices to make sure that there's continuity in a sustainable way between resilience at the level of the household, how people live and work, and then how we are able to protect all of our infrastructure and protect our reefs and our coastal environment. So we see it very much as a chain, as a loop. We have to make sure that resilience is built in first at the level of the homes. And so Roofs to Reefs includes everything from being able to make sure that people's homes can withstand hurricane events of a certain category, to making sure that people can make use of things like rainwater harvesting, to be able to have sustainable use of resources. Also to ensure we have a new program called HOPE, Home Ownership Providing Energy, which is an affordable housing program. And what that program does is it builds in renewable energy at the household level, roof-mounted solar PV, to make sure that people's energy use is also sustainable, that it makes the cost of the house more affordable because they're able to generate energy that goes into the grid and make use of that. But Roofs to Reefs, James, is simply to say that everything that we do must be able to build resilience at the household level, to the community level, in industrial sectors, and so on. And I have to say about Roofs to Reefs that it's really developing. We've made it visible as what we call an investment prospectus for climate resilience, is at the center of our nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. Because we really see this as a way to make sure that we're able to generate private sector investment, not just for mitigation, but also for adaptation. We are talking about thematic bonds. We've been working on something called growth and resilience bonds to be able to attract private investment for investment in Roofs to Reefs. So this is something that very much aligns with what we're talking about today. And I really look forward to hearing the rest of the conversation on the blue bonds.
Thank you very much, Marcia. And you started talking about the role of the private sector. And let me finish with that question. What is your vision of the role of the private sector in this blue economy?
Well, one of the things that we realize, and the climate agenda is this essential to the climate agenda, to being countries like ours being able to adapt and respond and be resilient to the climate crisis. But the fact is that we're not going to get where we need to go unless we close the financing gap, not just for mitigation, because mitigation tends to attract private investment, but for adaptation. And we want to make sure that adaptation also attracts private investment. What we've started to do with Roofs to Reefs, with the help of our partners, including IDB, is to be able to essentially be able to rank and rate and value projects and investments, to make sure that we're able to balance the public good nature and content of those projects with the return. And so in doing that with our Roofs to Reefs projects, we're really saying to the private sector, these are the projects that we believe are going to give you a significant return, and here's how. And so I think there's a tremendous role for the private sector to play. As you know, James, Barbados is today the largest issuer of natural disaster clauses in our instruments. We believe that that's the secret to closing the climate finance gap globally. We call them Barbados-style natural disaster clauses. We call them Barbados-style because we believe that they can be applied globally. The DSSI that was established to respond to the crisis generated $12 billion. If private and public debt is issued with natural disaster clauses, which means that you have essentially a moratorium of 2 years to be able to repay, that would create about $1 trillion in financing for adaptation and mitigation. So we think that things like blue bonds, green bonds, these kinds of climate-related thematic bonds and financing related to that really hold the answer for how our island economies are going to be able to work with the private sector to make sure that we have the necessary financing available to really be resilient.
Thank you, Marcia. And I also wanted to end up with a story. Many know in IDB Invest, or people that know me know the passion that I have for oceans, but very few know that when I was 18 years old, I had to take a decision between studying finance or doing an MBA or studying marine biology. Unfortunately or fortunately, I decided for finance that took me to the development world. And this is so nice to see those two passions of mine come together. So again, Marcia, I love the conversation. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. This is the reason why we have dedicated our efforts to understand and provide insights about the blue financing opportunities in the region. As I said before, one of the opportunities are blue bonds, a debt instrument to finance oceans and water-related initiatives. I will pass on to Carol to kick off the panel and the analysis from the experts. Thank you so much, Marcia, again, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Minister Cadell, for that fruitful and inspiring conversation. Before we continue, just one announcement. We've got 318 people connected with us today. And before the panel, let's watch this video. Welcome back. After diving into this beautiful video, let's dive into the blue bonds market. In recent years, we have witnessed the bond markets play a significant role in catalyzing investment to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal. The total green, social, and sustainable bond market, also known as the thematic bond market, is expanding rapidly, with $700 billion worth of sustainable debt issued in 2020 alone. While Europe has consistently represented the largest share of the thematic bond market, interestingly, our region has been the region with the fastest growth in thematic bond. Many green bonds issued today could be categorized as blue, and we believe that blue bonds are where green bond stood a decade ago, and we expect its share to grow. IDB Invest and UN Global Compact published this week a report entitled Accelerating Blue Bonds Issuances in Latin America and the Caribbean, and it presents the diverse types of companies and opportunities that can be linked to blue bond issuance. For example, blue bonds are not just for fisheries or shipping companies. Projects with direct impact on the ocean, seas, and fresh water, such as manufacturing, sustainable textile, can also be eligible for a blue bond. With that being said, we are moving to the second part of our webinar today, a panel to discuss the potential for blue bond globally and in our region. I am pleased to welcome the panelists joining us today from Finland, Switzerland, New York, and Washington, D.C. I would like to first introduce my colleague from the IDB, Greg Watson. Greg currently leads the IDB's Biodiversity Cluster, hello Greg, and its Natural Capital Lab. The lab serves as a one-stop shop for the IDB group and partners to drive innovation in natural capital finance. Greg also leads the IDB's effort to mainstream biodiversity in the bank, IDB, across the bank, and also in regional countries. Thank you, Greg, for being with us today. And my next panelist is Luca De Lorenzo from Finland. Thank you, Luca, for being with us. Luca has over 15 years of experience in the energy sector and sustainable finance, and is currently heading the sustainability team at the Nordic Investment Bank. Luca ensures that sustainability is at the core of the bank's operations. And Luca was leading successfully 2 blue bond issuance issued by the Nordic Investment Bank, and I am looking forward to hearing about his experience from the perspective of a successful blue bond issuer. And I'm also happy to welcome Divya Mankikar. Divya is a global head of ESG market engagement at S&P Global. Divya's experience and expertise in ESG, sustainable investment, and climate risk span over 13 years. And prior to joining S&P, Divya was the head of sustainable investment and climate strategy at CalPERS. So Divya can offer the perspective of an investor as well as a market facilitator for blue bond. So welcome everybody and thank you for being with us. So we can start the panel. I'm going to address Divya first with my first question. In the age of an explosion of thematic bond issuances, do you think that the blue label adds any value?
Well, thank you so much to the IDB and Carol for that wonderful introduction. I'm really happy to be joining you to discuss this topic. And as the previous discussion also highlighted, I also started my college career as a marine biology major. So thank you to the IDB for helping me, come back to consider some of those topics that I was passionate about earlier. As Carol mentioned, I worked at CalPERS, so I'd like to bring in the perspective of an investor, but also now I'm at S&P Global, so I have some perspective from a research provider and market facilitator as well. I think to answer your question about whether blue bonds add value, it's useful to consider the situation that we find ourselves in now. So the World Resources Institute last year issued research that by 2030, globally will face a freshwater deficit of, they estimate 56% compared to, what is needed for consumption. And at S&P TrueCost, through our environmental data set and serving corporations on their water use, we did find, in fact, a significant increase in water use over 2015 to 2018. So we see that corporations are increasingly reliant on water and that there's this, looming situation of scarcity. But it's actually not just scarcity. There are also water challenges related to physical climate impacts, as the wonderful panel before us discussed. So whether it's sea level rise or flooding or drought, there are many, water challenges that we face currently that we think the physical impacts of climate change will exacerbate. And so I absolutely think that blue bonds can add value. Literally financial value is at risk due to all of these water challenges. Going back to my sort of CalPERS days, we looked quite closely at the California Climate Assessment, which offers some examples that I think are useful to this discussion. So for example, in the United States, 13% of agricultural produce is produced in California. However, just looking at the water scarcity issue alone, it's estimated by the climate scientists within the California government and their partners that it could cost the state of California $50 billion per year by 2030 due to those water shortages. So I think we definitely can assign financial value to water, and blue bonds, as they are directing capital towards water efficient technology, adaptation and mitigation of water use, or redesigning corporate processes to take better account of the value of water, I think they will definitely add value.
Great news. This is what we wanted to hear. Thank you. My next question to Greg. Blue bonds so far have been primarily issued by the public so far. What are the successes and the failures or lessons learned that we can take from those issuances? And what do you think could be done in order to increase the engagement of the private sector?
Thanks, Carol. And I think it's important to start with the context of where we are this year, which is this is the global year of biodiversity. The Convention on Biodiversity is meeting this year to set new targets as the old targets are expiring. And also we see in the climate COP that there's an entire day focused on nature and nature-based solutions. And so I think that we're seeing this increased momentum around the topic and around the underlying issues that a blue bond could actually fund. And so I think that kind of starts to answer your second question first, but I think it's important that we ground ourselves in where we are today. And I think if we look at what's been going on in the public sector side, we have a lot of people talk about the Seychelles deal and as kind of a real emblematic deal. But I think that what Minister Cattle was saying is really important for us to dig deeper on in terms of both the issues around what do we classify as a blue bond and how do we develop those taxonomies, and also how do we create KPIs and performance indicators that are linked to these larger national objectives, be them in the country's NDC, be it in their biodiversity strategy and action plan, or be it in other sectors of the national planning strategy around infrastructure planning or job planning, because blue bonds can really affect all of those areas. And so for me, that's been, I think, the biggest shift that we've started to see. And with Minister Cattle's remarks, I could not agree more that we're starting to see where perhaps in the past there may have been a kind of focus on only one segment of, we want to issue a bond because we want to protect X% of marine area, and that would be the limited focus. Now we're seeing that there's this broader category of, if we can look at what the actual end goal of marine protection is, that involves a lot more than just a marine protected area. It involves investments onshore in water treatment. It involves sewage treatment. It involves conservation activities, yes, but also fishery activities, and then also coastal infrastructure could be included, especially where we're looking at nature-based solutions like mangroves or other kinds of natural infrastructure, coral reefs in many countries as well, and coral restoration. And then also even starting to look at things like tourism and investment in tourism promotion, or tourism actual investment in hard tourism assets that are related to the marine economy. So starting to bundle these different things together could be a real drive forward. And the way that we're looking at trying to do that is working with countries on kind of budget expenditure reviews and planning, so that you can go through what is the menu of different goals that a government might have and how can we put them together under a blue label. That also may require looking at what's been put under a green label in the past and pulling it out now and putting it under a blue label, because there are many of these activities that have been kind of folded in under the green side that now that we're kind of seeing a more mature blue market maybe can fit there. So I think I'll stop there. But that's a bit of what we're seeing in our conversations with countries.
Thanks, and I think it can lead well to extending this question to Divya, in particular from the perspective of an investor, market facilitator. What do you think, Divya, could be done, and what will be the steps to take in order to promote the blue bond market and make sure that its share can expand in the future?
Yeah, so I think, thank you for that question. I think it's similar to the dynamics that we see with other types of thematic bond issuance. So at S&P Sustainable One, that's the team that I'm on, which is a newly created team of climate and sustainability specialists. We support clients in looking, they may be investors looking to invest in green bonds or sustainability linked bonds. And one of the questions that they have is this credible? Are the proceeds actually going towards projects and activities that have a positive impact? And what we do there to help clients demonstrate credibility or look into the credibility of a product that they're looking to invest in is to look at the use of proceeds, to look at the baseline scenario of how a company is operating, what they're proposing to do differently, whether that has a positive impact. And, we're leveraging our research across 15,000 public companies, 5,000 private companies that looks at not just direct extraction of fresh water, but also supply chain dependence on fresh water, physical risk, as I was saying earlier, exposure to sea level rise and flooding and water stress. So looking out, to 2030 and 2050 to see whether the scarcity of water may increase because of climate change or because of regional overconsumption of the local freshwater sources. So all of these things, I think, demonstrate credibility and help to create confidence for the investor in investing in not just blue bonds, but green bonds, sustainability linked bonds. I think that's really key to, promoting the growth of the whole space, including the blue bond space.
Thank you, Divya. And we've got a success story with us today. We've got Luca from the Nordic Investment Bank. So the Nordic Investment Bank, in fact, is a leader or the leading issuer of a blue bond globally, with 2 issuances, 2 blue bond, first Nordic Baltic blue bond in 2019, followed by another issuance in 2020. So it will be very interesting to hear about your experience, Luca, as an issuer, and how the transaction fit with the Nordic Investment Bank sustainability strategy. And also will be nice to know how it was received by the market. Thank you, Luca.
Thank you, Carol, and a pleasure to join you from far away Finland today. You mentioned exactly, we have been able to issue 2 bonds in 2019 and 2020, blue bonds, of course, for a total of 300 million euros. So quite a good issuance there. And let me start maybe of how it links to the sustainability strategy. I mean, as a Nordic investment bank, the Baltic Sea is our local sea of our member states. So it has always been a priority for us to kind of finance sustainable action towards this water body, which is a shared water body by our member states. But then in 2016 and 2017, we had a good pipeline of projects, and we started talking to investors, institutional investors and so on, and who shared, let's say, the concerns and the passion for this water body, our Baltic Sea, and the issues that it has in terms of eutrophication and overall water use. And so we started discussing, and basically very quickly, so we started, maybe took a year or so, we realized that we could actually package, and it's a little bit to Greg's point, put together a series of investments and projects that we were in contact with and that we were working on, with a very specific goal of having a positive impact on the Baltic Sea. And so we did that, And of course, we were able to issue our first blue bond. We are also issuers of green bonds. So for us, it was relatively easy to put together a framework for the blue bond and follow, of course, very similar processes in terms of criteria for project selection and all of the reporting that you do to the investor. So if you're an experienced thematic bond issuer, I think it is not that difficult to move into the blue into the blue area. To the question about how was it received from the market, it was quite well received. As I said, we had a few, let's say, anchor investors, institutional investors from our member regions that were very keen and very interested. But when we did issue, we opened it up to the market, and so we received much more interest, and so we are very satisfied with the program so far.
Thank you, Luca. And continuing with you, it would be interesting to know about the lessons learned during this process, how you think that those lessons could apply to a potential issuer in our region, in Latin America and the Caribbean.
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, some of them are replicable, I guess, some less so. But at a higher level, and also following some of the conversation and the good dialogue so far, I think it's good to start with the water body that you're targeting, and with the clear impact or set of impacts that you're trying to achieve. For us, it was the Baltic Sea, eutrophication as a main concern. If you're talking about the Caribbean, you would highlight that, and it could be coastal regions. And only after that, when you have that clarity, as Greg was mentioning, then you look at the type of projects that are behind fulfilling that impact. And those can be varied. They can be on the coast, they could be in the water, they could be ecosystem type of projects, they could be infrastructure type of project, they could be water, wastewater treatment type of projects, but they all are connected by the bond to the impact. And I would be happy to hear Divya's view, but from our conversation with investors, that's what they like. It's when they can clearly see the link between what they're buying, the projects, and the impact. And that's good. So if you can build that.
Divya, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the potential for reputational risk is a little bit higher with the thematic bonds. So we definitely support, issuers, sovereign corporates, non-financial corporates in issuing and investors in really looking at what is the positive impact of a green or sustainability linked bond. And in addition, what we also see is an interest in the Sustainable Development Goals. So related to this conversation, there are at least 2, but likely many more Sustainable Development Goals linked to clean water and sanitation, SDG 6, I believe, and SDG 14, life below water. And I think all of these trends are kind of converging in some sense, with investors looking at the SDGs, increasing their consideration and integration of environmental, social, and governance, ESG characteristics, and then looking across asset classes. So what started maybe in listed equities, we see it growing so much more in the fixed income and corporate credit space.
Thank you, Divya. The impact of the COVID-19 crisis has increased the relevance for a sustainable and inclusive recovery. When we speak about blue, we mention the green aspect of the blue bond, but the social side is also integrated into a blue label. And I would like to hear from Greg how this social side is incorporated. And my second question to Greg will be, if we take into account the green aspect and social aspect of the blue bonds, which sector he believes will be the most likely to have the most potential for a blue bond asset class? Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Carol. And it's been interesting in the last year, actually. We've been working with one government who has not yet publicly issued their report, so I can't name it, but on their COVID blue economy recovery strategy. And so what that entailed was actually looking at 15 different projects across the coastal and ocean areas that have this focus of creating jobs, of getting money into the local economy of the coasts. And these 15 projects, I'd say 12 of them actually have returns. They basically have business models behind them and can take different kinds of investment, not just traditional grant finance, but actually private finance, and there's actually private actors in several of them. And so, and I think that's interesting because you see what I was saying before, which is that if a government's approaching this of looking at, what problems am I trying to solve across a wide swath of issues, from employment, income, to marine protection, to on land activities, how do I put those together so that $1 has multiple benefits? I do think that if we're looking specifically for sectors, coastal protection and protection of coastal ecosystems typically has huge spillover effects, both in terms of if there's restoration activities, there's direct employment, but also they create habitat for fisheries and for other coastal activities that are creating jobs and actually creating also sources of food for populations. And so that's a really important link to the social side there. And then also when you start to look at, depending on the country, at the tourism sector, that could be a tremendously important employer, especially coming out of COVID-19, as we hope that many of these countries will be soon. That's another segment that hopefully is ripe for some sorts of investment in this area. So, when we've done our analysis with specific countries, those seem to be the ones that are most ready.
Thank you, Greg. I'm conscious of time, and my last question, I would like you to keep it sweet and short. It will be a question about how you expect this blue bond to be in the years to come. Just one sentence to summarize blue bonds for the next decade. So I'll start with you, Luca.
Yeah, I would only say maybe I'm surprised we haven't seen more already. So that's my start. And I think water is such an important resource. We have seen some, and we're kind of abusing it to some extent. I think it's going to come. It's going to come.
Thank you, Luca. Divya, your turn.
Yeah, likewise, the challenges are enormous, but so are the opportunities. And I think this is a really smart way for corporations to both generate the capital that they need, but invest it in solving such a major challenge. So I think I'm optimistic about the growth of blue bonds.
Thank you. And you, Greg?
I'm also very optimistic because I see blue bond ideas coming from very disparate parts of the community, some from government, some from private issuers, some from project promoters. And so the diversity of actors that are talking about this is higher than it's ever been before.
So let's meet again, let's say in 2 years, 5 years time, and we can summarize what would have happened. And hopefully we will be speaking about no longer a nascent asset class, but really a real asset class here to stay in the fixed income markets. I thank you everyone for your participation. We reached the end of our allocated time. So I thank you, Divya, Greg, and Luca, for giving us your views on the future of the blue bond and opportunities for the region, of course. So let's move now to the third part of our webinar today. Our last special guest is also the co-author of our publication, Accelerating Blue Bond Issuances in Latin America and the Caribbean. It is Eric Gierski with us today. Thank you, Eric, for joining us. Eric is the head of Ocean at UN Global Compact, and Eric will be giving us his closing remarks. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you so much, Carol, and thanks to all your great colleagues for organizing this great launch event. And it's been a fantastic journey working with all of you to really learn about the deep insights you have in the Latin American economies and economy at large. And the blue economy, as we all know and we have discussed today, is really on the rise, and it will be significant for the whole world to meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, to meet the Paris Agreement, to meet the 1.5 degree target. And we need real good toolkits. I will start reflecting on the seminar by quoting what Minister Cadell and James Scriven started on. We are all here to enjoy the discussion, and really it has been very enjoyable, and I think it's a good thing to meet up again, because this is a good crowd to discuss with. Everybody's very optimistic and we want to move this forward. I think we should really recognize that there is a big appetite, and we heard that today, that investors, they would like to invest in impact. And when you as an investor consider a project, there are two concerns you have to take into account. It's risk and the future value of your investment. And risk today is something totally different than 10, 15 years ago. Risk today is to be a part of stranded assets, or investing in something that's not sustainable 5, 10, or 15 years from now. And this is a game changer. And that's why we need good frameworks. We need, as Greg said, we need to clarity on the KPIs, on the targets that we're setting. And as Divya said, it must be credible. It should be science-based. It should be verifiable by a second-party opinion, and it should be able to be sold on to a second-hand market later on. These are very important measures for both private and public investments. And I'm glad to hear that the Nordic Investment Bank also see that they're looking beyond the Baltic Sea to find these instruments to be applicable, because this is something that the whole world can actually take part in. Private investors are looking for low risk on negative sustainability with long-term impact. And that's why we at the UN Global Compact has been working very hard to tailor, together with IDB and others, these instruments so that we can have agreement on what is a blue bond and what's not. The growth of the blue economy will be significant for small island states and medium level economies and the world at large to have energy security with offshore wind, to have food security with sustainable fisheries, sustainable aquaculture. It will be about water and waste management and, of course, green transport. There's a big job to be done, huge investment opportunities, and with the accessibility of small-scale investments all over the world, this is a super opportunity. We have to unlock the potential so that we can really enjoy and harvest the big potential of the blue planet that we're all living on. So that is my summary. And this is a beginning, as some of you said. A few blue bonds have been issued. Let's make sure we have a few significant ones coming out this year. And next year, it's the UN Ocean Conference. We will have a high-level roundtable on blue bonds and the ocean economy there. You're all invited to come in person and online, because this is a global issue that we would like to have everybody to take a part in. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. I'm looking forward to next year's event and hopefully more blue bonds to showcase. So we came to the end of this webinar, but it's not the end of the conversation about expanding the blue economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, and about the acceleration of the blue bonds. I invite you to reach out to IDB Invest to continue this conversation, to advance towards a sustainable ocean economy. You can download our report, which is available on idbinvest.org/bluebond, and you can also click directly onto this webpage. IDB Invest wants to encourage the participation of the private sector in this new bond asset class. IDB Invest already structured and or participated as a purchaser of thematic bond in our region. To date, we participated in 20 thematic bond transactions. So we would welcome an opportunity, obviously, to participate in blue bond. And we are pleased to continue a dialogue. So please reach out to me. You've got my details if you want to continue this conversation with me or with my colleagues at IDB Invest. We have arrived at the end of our webinar, and we can close on today. And I thank all the panelists who joined us from Barbados, New York, Washington, DC, Finland, Switzerland for joining us for this event, and obviously And I also thank the audience. We had 318 people joining us to this event. And as I said earlier, this event is also recorded, so many more participants could listen in to this fruitful conversation about the blue economy and the blue bond. I thank everybody and have a good day. Thank you.